Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers. Today's episode is going to be an incredibly special episode for two completely different and separate reasons. The first is that I recently got myself a light wand. Look, it's a wand and it shoots light out of it. Looks like a lightsaber. It's pretty impressive. It's pretty dope. Look at that. Look at that. Let me light wand your face right there. Cool. We're all on board. Light wand. Look. Adding depth. Ooh, light wand behind my head. Ooh, light wand with the green light in the background, like a lightsaber battle. Pretty dope, right? And the second reason that today's video is incredibly important, and probably a little bit more important than the first reason, is because today's video is actually being brought to you by Stephen Michael Davis, who's a good friend of the channel. He makes excellent content, and he's let us have a preview of his first video in a new series about progressive myth-making and this idea that the Democratic primary was rigged against Bernie Sanders. So without further ado, without the attention being delayed or pervert on my light wand, I'm going to leave you with Stephen Michael Davis's video.
Thank you, Sean, for that generous introduction. Thank you, Sean's audience, for tuning in. You may have heard of me before. Sean has only shouted me out approximately 1 million times, and he's kind enough to allow me to post a video on his channel. If you like it, by all means come over and check out my other work. The link is in the description box below. While I'm incredibly grateful for this opportunity from Sean, and I'm very happy to be here, make no mistake, this is a melancholy occasion. Today is the 1-year anniversary of a very dark day in the history of our great republic. 1 year ago today was Bloody Monday.
Bloody Monday?
What was Bloody Monday, you ask? Was it a terrorist attack? Was it some horrific natural disaster? Was it some terrible accident that killed hundreds or even thousands of people? No. It was the day that the powers that be derailed the movement that could have saved this country.
What I'm calling Bloody Monday, which is the turning point of the race, namely Amy Klobuchar and Mayor Pete dropping out and endorsing Biden, that day alone radicalized a whole new generation. Because they saw, in order to even make the race competitive, in order to give Biden a fighting chance, you needed all the king's horses and all the king's men, and Obama behind the scenes making a phone call, getting them to drop out and endorse Biden, Warren staying in the race to siphon votes from Bernie. You needed the perfect storm to come together to defeat Bernie.
So no blood was actually spilled on Bloody Monday, and Mayor Pete actually dropped out on Sunday. So, yeah. Now, who exactly cares that these two unremarkable politicians ended their long-shot bids for the Democratic nomination? Well, very few people, I imagine. In fact, that's kind of the point, as we'll see. There was one group of people that was very animated by this. The online Bernie supporters were furious. As you may have heard, the DNC rigged the primaries against Bernie in 2016 and 2020.
I've seen the DNC now 2 cycles in a row scuttle an actual progressive candidate. Well, a leftist candidate, I guess, would be a better way of describing Bernie.
Works.
And
2 cycles in a row, the DNC robbed Bernie of the nomination that was rightly his. It's enough to make your blood boil. Rigged is kind of a vague term, but when most of them say this, they mean that Bernie would have won the nomination were it not for the malicious interventions from party bosses like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Tom Perez, and Barack Obama. The online left is not exclusive in their belief that things went down this way. In fact, most of the internet seems to buy into this. The problem is, it's largely not true for 2016 or 2020. Don't get me wrong, there are some legitimate complaints that Bernie supporters have. But by and large, the narrative of a rigged primary is built upon misinformation, rumors, hearsay, misunderstanding, double standards, and other fraudulent assumptions. I swear, if you didn't know anything about American politics, and you just got your news from leftist YouTubers, you wouldn't even know that primary elections were even held.
I would argue that the Democratic primary, this time and last time, really exposed how there's like a lot of democracy theater involved,
yes, right.
You know, because you'll recall back when Bernie Sanders was leading and it looked very likely that he would end up with a plurality of the delegates, everyone was like, that's nice, but ultimately, let's remember, it's the party who gets to ultimately decide who the nominee is.
Right.
That's cute with your door knocking, that's cute with your donations, that's cute with your votes, but it's going to come down to us. So there is definitely a lot of democracy theater involved with this.
You wouldn't know that over 3.5 million more people voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016 than did Bernie Sanders.
Watching that convention
was one of the saddest things I've ever seen news-wise.
Yeah.
It was insane to watch him bend the knee in front of a crowd full of people chanting his name. Like that delegation was clearly there for Bernie, and one by one their superdelegates and representatives stood up and handed it to Clinton.
You wouldn't know that almost 10 million people voted for Joe Biden over Bernie in 2020. I have met people who are completely unaware of this. They assume that more people voted for Bernie, but the DNC just picked their nominee anyways. Again, there are some legitimate grievances, but a lot of this is derived from a misunderstanding of the primary process. But, more than anything, most of it is just motivated reasoning. Bernie supporters are the people who think that almost all elections in the United States are fraudulent anyways, because billionaires and corporations just determine who wins the race by tricking voters with political advertising.
Mitch McConnell and a lot of the Republicans trick their voters with money. What does the money do? They get the money from the NRA and then they run ads. They overwhelm sometimes Democrats in their races with ads.
That is, unless, of course, the progressive wins the race. Then and only then does the election actually reflect the will of the people. This is why when people ask me if I believe the DNC rigged the primary against Bernie, my answer is it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter in that I don't think anything the DNC did would have changed the results. And more importantly, it doesn't matter in that Bernie supporters were going to cry foul as long as they didn't win. When this is your standard for an election,
We can win, man. We can win. All things being equal, we win because our ideology is more popular.
then losing is inherently unfair. And you'll work your way backwards to find out why the result doesn't really count. Bernie supporters are hardly unique in this way. Unfortunately, there are lots of sore losers all over the political spectrum, but Bernie supporters might be the most gratuitous and self-defeating. Gratuitous in that they simply make up grievances in addition to real ones, and self-defeating in that even if many of these faux grievances were true, they seriously undermine their own case. Bloody Monday is the perfect example of both of these. Before we get into specifics about what happened on Super Tuesday and the day before it, let's briefly recap what happened in the race for the Democratic nomination prior to that. Bernie Sanders won a plurality of the popular vote in the first three contests. In terms of pledged delegates, Bernie was an extremely close second in Iowa, he had an even split with Mayor Pete in New Hampshire, and then dominated in Nevada. At this point in the race, Bernie was the clear frontrunner for the nomination, with 538 giving him a 45.9% chance of winning the majority of delegates going into the convention. The second most likely possibility, at 39.9% odds, wasn't even another candidate. It was a brokered convention. A brokered convention is when no one has a majority of delegates after all the primaries and caucuses are done, and the party's nominee is determined by several rounds of voting by the elected delegates. No other candidates' odds were even in double digits, with Biden leading the also-rans with an 8.7% chance. The next contest was the South Carolina primary. This election was huge for Bernie, in that, if he won, he could effectively put the competition away. Moreover, in order to win, he would necessarily need to perform strongly with black voters, something he failed to do effectively in 2016. And as a famous YouTuber once told me, as go elderly black voters, so goes the Democratic nomination. For a while, it looked like Bernie was going to have a very strong showing, even if he came in second. Then, just 3 days before the contest, Joe Biden scored a huge endorsement. Veteran South Carolina congressman and the highest-ranking black politician in the Democratic Party, James Clyburn, threw his weight behind the former vice president. That Tuesday, Biden won handily. All was not lost for Bernie, though, not even close. Despite Biden's win, Bernie was still the favorite by the odds makers and still led Biden in delegates. Furthermore, Super Tuesday looked promising for Bernie for a number of reasons. Even though he won South Carolina, Biden had almost no campaign infrastructure in most Super Tuesday states.
Guys, he's going to implode. Even if he wins South Carolina. Super Tuesday voting happens 2 days after. You think there's going to be enough of a media bump to take him from like 5% in the polls, 10% in the polls, and even get him above the 15% threshold in most of those states? No way. And now with Bloomberg involved, carpet bombing the airways with ads, he's got more. Bloomberg has more of a presence in Super Tuesday states than Joe Biden does. And Bloomberg is totally astroturfed as a candidate. It's all bought. All of his support is bought. Everything. Turns out when Donald Trump nicknamed Joe Biden Sleepy Joe, he wasn't playing, dog. This is the sleepiest shit I've ever seen in my life. He's not even campaigning for president. Super Tuesday, that's where it's all at. That's where it's all at, man.
On top of that, another candidate was entering the race. Mike Bloomberg and his mammoth campaign had skipped the first 4 contests in favor of making a major Super Tuesday play. One of the most moderate candidates in the field, Bloomberg seemed more likely to cut into Biden's chunk of the electorate than Bernie's. On top of that, the polling was looking very good for Bernie.
10 days before Super Tuesday, we were literally ahead in every single state. Every single state.
All things considered, even though he lost South Carolina, Bernie was still the favorite for the nomination. Then it happened. Bloody Monday. Barack Obama picked up the phone and called all of the moderate candidates, instructed them to drop out and endorse Biden, which would give his former vice president an advantage over Bernie Sanders. At least, this is how things went down according to the online left.
He was the centrist clown that Obama pushed through, got everyone to drop out and back him when he won one state.
And it worked. The moderates followed Obama's instructions, endorsed Biden, and the rest is history. Biden dominated on Super Tuesday, and he never looked back. Despite the stalwart resistance of the online left, Biden continued to steamroll Bernie to the nomination. Progressives still resent what happened on Bloody Monday, when Bernie was once again robbed of the nomination that was rightly his.
That day alone radicalized a whole new generation.
So where do I begin? Well, how about I start out by pointing out that this really didn't happen. There are a lot of salacious headlines out there that seem to validate the Bloody Monday narrative, but if you actually take the time to read the articles, you begin to realize that none of the reporting actually cashes out the claims that our friends on the left make. Mayor Pete did speak with Barack Obama, but it wasn't until after he dropped out. On Sunday evening of March 1st, which is Sunday, by the way, Buttigieg canceled a scheduled rally in Texas, made his formal announcement that he was suspending his candidacy, then explained his decision on a conference call with campaign donors. It wasn't until later that night that he spoke with Barack Obama and Joe Biden separately. Joe Biden formally asked him for an endorsement, but Obama never instructed him in any way. According to the New York Times, Mr. Obama did not specifically encourage Mr. Buttigieg to endorse Mr. Biden, said the official who insisted on anonymity to discuss private conversations. But Mr. Obama did note that Mr. Buttigieg had considerable leverage at the moment and should think about how best to use it. When I bring this up on Twitter, leftists frequently respond by sending this article from NBC News, looking for Obama's hand in candidates coalescing around Biden. This isn't the gotcha they think it is. The article only repeats the New York Times reporting, and on top of that, here's the last line. Amy Klobuchar, who dropped out of the race on Monday, and who possibly, along with Buttigieg, will appear with Biden in Dallas Monday night, has not had any conversations with Obama, her press secretary said. So, of the 2 candidates that did drop out before Super Tuesday, Obama only spoke with one of them, and after that candidate dropped out, and he never told him to endorse Biden. The funny thing is, I actually witnessed this rumor start in real time. It's a great demonstration in how disinformation spreads online. The whole narrative started as speculation on Super Tuesday, when the night wasn't looking good for Bernie. Young Turks reporter Emma Vigeland shared her thoughts on the events that had transpired over the previous 2 days.
Jake has been teasing us about this great theory that you have, so I want to hear about that. What is that theory?
My theory, it's backed up by reporting that Buttigieg and Obama spoke over the weekend. Then Buttigieg dropped out and endorsed Joe Biden. Then Amy Klobuchar, what do you know? She drops out. And then Beto O'Rourke, the original Obama impersonator until Pete Buttigieg came along. Then he goes and endorses Joe Biden. So I think there's a coordinated effort on behalf of the Democratic establishment to say we got to coalesce behind this guy. I think that's clear. Everyone knows that. But who has the power to spurn that kind of organizing effort? Who has the power to get people to these people with huge egos? I mean, Pete Buttigieg, the mayor, the 37-year-old mayor running for president. How do you get that kind of guy to drop out and endorse someone? It's got to be from the top. And I think Obama made calls to more than Pete Buttigieg. That's just my hunch.
So I love that theory by Emma. I saw it first from your Twitter account, Emma, honestly. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, yeah, that's obviously true. Okay, nobody else has the power to call Beto O'Rourke and have him ruin his career in Texas by backing Biden on a bridge to nowhere other than Obama.
Over time, this explanation resonated within the progressive newssphere, and people just sort of forgot that there was never any reporting that backed it up, but they took it on as fact all the same.
This is what happens when you meddle, right? Talk about meddling in the elections. We have to look at Obama more than Russia, I would say, given that, he coordinated all these people to drop out.
Later, after it was just assumed to be true, people used it as a premise in even more baseless speculation.
Obama picked Hillary. Obama cleared the path for Biden.
That's right.
He moved all those chess pieces, got Pete to drop out, all of that, so that Biden could win in South Carolina and go on. And I very strongly suspect that his hand is behind picking who will be Biden's successor, Kamala Harris.
Incredible. It's not every day that you get to witness the evolution of misinformation firsthand. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, you don't believe the reporting. Let's say you think it's all wrong and that Obama did in fact orchestrate the whole thing. Well, that still wouldn't really matter on any level. There's a paragraph from that NBC News article that I mentioned earlier that's worth taking note of. People close to Obama said the former president has been keeping close tabs on the race. They said the signal had been sent in the past 36 hours that he sees Biden as the candidate to back, and they don't need Obama to say it publicly or privately. Barack Obama didn't need to send out a signal publicly or privately because the signal was so obvious that anyone with eyes could see it. At this point in the race, the only realistic option for the nominee other than Bernie Sanders was Joe Biden. People forget that Biden was only down by 6 delegates at this point. Mike Bloomberg, who progressives conveniently forget was still in the race on Super Tuesday when they squawk about moderate consolidation, entered the race too late to have a realistic chance of winning the nomination outright. According to reporting done by Politico, Bloomberg's entire plan was to win the nomination through a brokered convention. This would have been a disaster for the Democratic Party. If Sanders secures a plurality of delegates but loses the nomination on a second ballot, many moderate and progressive Democrats alike predict that the national convention in Milwaukee would devolve into chaos. Devolve into chaos is an understatement of what would have happened.
If Bernie wins a plurality and they steal it from him and they try to shove somebody else down our throats, first of all, Milwaukee will burn. That's what's going to happen. Now, I believe in peaceful protest. I believe in nonviolent resistance. But you think you could just override the will of the voters and then they don't do anything in response that could be violent? Who are you kidding, bro?
Remember, this was all before COVID-19, when we actually used to meet in person. As the Democratic Party learned in 1968, a chaotic convention can be costly, especially when part of your base has a reputation for being destructive and your opponent likes running on law and order. So Bloomberg was a no-go. The best Amy Klobuchar had done was third in New Hampshire. So it's not like she was going to win the majority of delegates either. Elizabeth Warren had won a grand total of 8 delegates at this point, so she certainly wasn't a viable option. Mayor Pete started out strong but got clobbered in South Carolina, where he had spent more time campaigning than any other candidate. Many people speculated that Mayor Pete's low marks with African-American voters would be his Achilles heel, and the South Carolina primary proved that speculation to be correct. And again, as that famous YouTuber once told me, that constituency is more important than any other for winning the Democratic nomination. High turnout among black voters is also extremely important for Democrats to win a general election. So given the options before them, for the people who didn't want Bernie to be the nominee, the choice was obvious. Go with the guy who proved he could inspire African-American voters. Go with the guy who has already been on 2 winning tickets. Go with the guy who was second in delegates and still had a realistic chance of winning the nomination outright. Go with the guy who inspired that Obama nostalgia, Joe Biden. And that's who the Democrats went with. And when I say Democrats, I don't just mean party bosses, who certainly didn't want Bernie to be the nominee. I also mean Democratic voters. At the beginning of the race, when Bernie was winning and the field was still crowded, a lot of media outlets would bifurcate the field into moderate and progressive sections. The left was not having it.
That's not how people think about politics. They don't think about it like that. But they're trying to make the case, oh, see, the centrists are more popular. Somebody said on Twitter, oh, if Mayor Pete, Amy Klobuchar, and Joe Biden all run together as one person wearing a giant trench coat and standing on each other's shoulders, then we're in trouble. Like, this is not how elections work.
Then, when 2 moderate candidates dropped out and their support went to Biden, and Elizabeth Warren stayed in, which they say siphoned support from Bernie, all of a sudden, without a second of contrition, they bought the idea that politics actually works this way.
So you coalesced and consolidated at the very last minute to stab the populist progressive in the back, the guy who would have gotten us health care and would have ended the wars.
Funny how that works. Also, as far as Elizabeth Warren goes, there's no evidence that Obama had her stay in the race to take support away from Bernie. Also, Super Tuesday happened after Warren accused Bernie of sexism. After that, she was officially denounced by the online left, excluding those, of course, who didn't already think she was a fraud, and was in no way, shape, or form committed to the progressive movement.
Elizabeth Warren waiting for the perfect opportunity to swoop in there and Tanya Harding Bernie. Just sexism. If this shit happened 2 years ago, they've obviously been sitting on it. Why is she all of a sudden pretending to be mad at him and hate him just before the prime? Oh.
So, in other words, Elizabeth Warren had exposed herself as a fake progressive, but for the purposes of explaining away Bernie Sanders' terrible Super Tuesday performance, she was all of a sudden a real progressive again.
Oh, and we can also blame the snake. She would have had an actual big effect if she did drop out. If she did drop out and endorse Bernie. She came in third place in her own home state. She could have given that to Bernie if she would have dropped out and endorsed him, but she didn't, and there's like all sorts of proof that showed that if Warren did drop out, everyone would have went to Bernie.
The thing that really gets me is how quick progressives are to invoke conspiracy. The Obama coordinating everything behind the scenes narrative isn't just false. It doesn't add any explanatory value. I have an alternative theory to explain what happened, and my theory is much simpler and far more parsimonious. Now, this might sound a little crazy to you, but just bear with me. I think that when people are running in a race, and it becomes clear that they have no chance of winning, they tend to drop out of that race. That's a little far-fetched, I know, but it's honestly what I believe. So, sorry to all the people who think that Mayor Pete stabbed Bernie in the back, or that Amy Klobuchar was engaged in some horrible act of betrayal, but other candidates are not obligated in any way to stick around for the benefit of your guy. You see, campaigning for public office costs a lot of money, energy, effort, and time, and a losing campaign tends to have those things in short supply. When Pete and Amy dropped out, neither of them had any cash on hand. Not everyone has an army of online idiots willing to throw endless donations of $27 at a lost cause. Just because your guy has a bad habit of sticking around well past the point of his campaign's expiration date doesn't mean that other people are going to follow suit. Most presidential primaries come down to two people. The field wasn't going to stay fractured forever. Amazingly, this wasn't just something that online leftists got all hot and bothered about. This was an actual part of Bernie's campaign strategy.
We knew we needed 2 or 3 people in this race heading into Super Tuesday and beyond to make sure we could be the nominee.
First of all, they had a split field on Super Tuesday. Mike Bloomberg was still in the race at this point, something progressives just conveniently forget. Second, let's consider what a genuinely terrible strategy and what a failure to adjust that is. Did they really think that more candidates weren't going to fall after 4 contests? And finally, if your candidate needed a fractured field in order to win, then your candidate sucks. This was the guy who was supposed to beat Trump. This was your champion. The great Bernie Sanders, bested by the endorsements of an ex-mayor of an inconsequential city in Indiana and a soccer mom senator from a middling Midwestern state. Really? That's all it took? 2 candidates, I should point out, who Bernie supporters routinely mocked as lame and irrelevant.
I just felt the need to go to sleep immediately whenever I heard her say anything, because she just drones on and on and on without really saying anything meaningful or substantive. And really, I don't know who is going to find what she's saying inspirational, who's going to feel motivated to come out and vote for her.
I have no problem saying it. Super awkward, super loserish, but she also thinks she's the and it is beyond unbearable, which is why I sound right now like I can't bear it.
Pete Buttigieg's cringy campaign dance. Mystery why he has no black support.
There's a reason. Everybody was speculating, why is Mayor Pete at 0% with black voters? I don't know. Maybe because he's terrible? Why is Mayor Pete doing really bad with younger voters? I don't know. Maybe because they see through his nonsense, and when push comes to shove, they see he represents nothing, no change, the status quo.
These two were the undoing of the great left-wing hope. I'll close on this. There is nothing illegitimate about endorsements. All they are glorified suggestions. At the end of the day, people make their own choices. And on Super Tuesday, over 650,000 more people chose Biden over Bernie. After that, Biden won again and again and again. After all was said and done, nearly 10 million people voted for Biden over Bernie. And that's why Joe Biden was the Democratic nominee. But what about the Iowa caucus debacle? And what about those long lines? And what about 2016? What about the superdelegates? Didn't Hillary get the debate questions beforehand? Didn't the DNC admit to rigging the primary in a lawsuit? I will eventually go over all of these claims, but not here. For that, you'll have to go over to my channel. Once again, I want to thank Sean for this opportunity. I owe him a great deal already, and am only further in his debt after this upload. Thank you to all of you who made it this far. I hope you enjoyed it. This series will by no means be the only focus of my channel going forward, but I do intend to finish it. Like I said at the beginning, Bernie supporters do have some legitimate grievances, but for the most part, they're just sore losers.